Welcome to Manifest Destiny, Westward Expansion, and the War with Mexico. This is Melinda Klein. The years of territorial expansion, population growth, immigration, and economic prosperity that followed victory in a war with Mexico also proved to be years of foreboding for the United States. Between 1845 and 1848, the United States increased its size by 50% through war, negotiation, and by annexing former territories to the Union. This time is characterized by the following: political strains that centered on the slavery debate, relations with Mexico, U.S. expansionism, and growing religious and racial prejudice. Manifest destiny is a phrase that expressed the belief that the United States had a mission to expand, spreading its form of democracy and freedom. Advocates of manifest destiny believed that expansion was not only good, but that it was obvious, manifest, and certain destiny. Originally a political catchphrase of the 19th century, manifest destiny eventually became a standard historical term, often used as a synonym for the territorial expansion of the United States across North America towards the Pacific Ocean. Americans, rich and poor, native-born or immigrant, kept their eyes on the developing American West. Railroads, canals, roads, and communication lines stretched farther west every year. By the 1850s, the telegraph had reached Oregon and California. The northern boundary was negotiated in a treaty with the British for an official boundary designation at Canada. Eastern newspapers encouraged readers in cities looking for work to go west, young man, instead of waiting for better jobs and opportunities to present themselves. This was a young people's movement. New England families would, in the thousands, head to the Great Plains, to Oregon and California by wagon train, until the first Continental Railroad was finished by 1869. The Mormons migrated from the Midwest in the early 1840s, still Mexican territory, where they would ultimately settle, becoming the Great Salt Lake area in the territory of Utah. As mentioned, the Mormons were persecuted by other Christians because of their differences. The movement's leader, Joseph Smith, would be jailed and later killed in June 1844 after Smith published his latest sanction of polygamy as a Mormon practice. Leadership then fell to Brigham Young, and it would be Young who would lead the 15,000 or so members from Illinois to the Great Salt Lake Basin. In the early to mid-19th century, wagon train migrations into Texas, throughout the Southwest, and to Oregon moved hundreds of thousands of Americans, immigrants, former slaves, and Midwest farming families far west between 1840 and 1860. A jumping-off point from civilization could have been Independence, Missouri, or St. Joseph, Iowa. Hired guides took wagoners far west. Those who could not afford to come west along the wagon train route with their own transportation joined as laborers, prostitutes, ranch hands, domestic servants, or as teachers. As this map shows, the war with Mexico was fought across an enormous area. Soldiers and officers like Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant gained much experience in this war that prepared them for later battles in the U.S. Civil War. As soon as the U.S. admitted Texas to statehood in 1845, Mexico broke diplomatic relations with Washington, D.C. In 1846, Oregon and California were settled by Americans, greatly outnumbering the Spanish-speaking population. The President of the United States at the time was President Polk. This is remembered as Mr. Polk's War. President Polk, a firm believer in manifest destiny, along with Congress, wanted to negotiate for Mexico's northern provinces for $30 million. Mexico's Republican government did not accept, and under no conditions would have voluntarily given up half of their territory. While these northern provinces did not contribute to the national economy of Mexico, nonetheless, the government, engaged in a civil war at the time, turned Polk down. Ultimately, between conflict and dispute, war would commence through 1846 and into 1847. Ultimately, a treaty would be drawn up for the northern territories to be sold to the United States as a war concession for $15 million. In the final year of battles with Mexico over their northern territories with U.S. troops under President Polk, gold was discovered in Northern California at Sutter's Mill, Sacramento. By the end of 1848, $6 million had been extracted from the region. Easterners saw this as a good time to head west. This was a clear sign of prosperous times ahead for Americans. 55,000 alone this year came by wagon train. By 1849, the U.S. was caught up in gold rush fever. From the 1840s in America, there was a large outpouring of new literature. Books were many. Improvements had been made to printing and distribution of materials. New books included many things, not only classics, but books for the home like cookbooks, child rearing, housekeeping, personal etiquette, among others, the sentimental novel, which middle-class women bought by the millions. These books were very popular because in them, usually the woman, middle class, was the main character, talking about her life that perhaps wasn't as quite as happy as others might presume. While the Mexican War was debated and fought, the issue of slavery persisted. In August of 1846, a Pennsylvania Democrat, Congressman David Wilmot, offered an amendment, quote, that as an express and fundamental condition of the acquisition of any territory from the Republic of Mexico, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall ever exist in any part of said territory. This proviso pushed the country ever closer to civil war. The Compromise of 1850 was a series of laws to regulate the spread of slavery in the territories acquired during the Mexican-American War. In 5 laws balancing the interests of slaveholding states of the American Southwest, California was admitted as a free state. Texas received money for relinquishing claim to lands east of the Rio Grande, and the territory of New Mexico was organized without any specific prohibition to slavery. Meanwhile, the slave trade, but not slavery itself, was abolished in Washington, D.C., and the stringent Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 was passed, requiring all U.S. citizens to assist in the return of runaway slaves.